Marcus had learned to notice the small kindnesses that others overlooked, the way his 6-year-old daughter Lily shared her last cookie, how she'd stopped to pet every stray cat on their walks home from school. But when he helped a frail elderly woman struggling at the ATM outside the grocery store, fumbling with her worn wallet and trembling hands, he expected nothing more than her quiet, "Thank you." What he didn't expect was for her to remember his name 3 months later, or for the phone call that would change everything. Some acts of kindness ripple outward in ways we never see coming, touching lives we never knew needed touching, creating connections that feel almost like fate. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe and leave a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The ATM screen flickered blue against the late afternoon shadows, casting electronic light across the weathered brick of Miller's grocery. Marcus shifted the plastic bags in his left hand, feeling the weight of another careful shopping trip. Generic cereal, marked-down milk, the small luxuries he could still afford for Lily, tucked between necessities. The woman ahead of him stood barely 5 feet tall, her silver hair caught in a loose bun that had come partially undone. Her cardigan hung loose on her frame, and she held a leather wallet so worn the edges had gone soft and pale. She'd been standing there for 3 minutes now, her finger hovering over the keypad. "Excuse me." Her voice was paper-thin. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to hold you up." Marcus set his bags down. "Take your time." She turned slightly, and he caught the tremor in her hands, the way she gripped the wallet like an anchor. "It's just the numbers. They're so small and I can't quite—" She gestured helplessly at the screen. Lily tugged at his jacket. At 6, she had developed an uncanny ability to sense when adults were struggling with things that should be simple. "Daddy, can we help her?" The woman's eyes, pale blue that reminded him of winter mornings, found his daughter's face. Something softened there. "What do you need to do?" Marcus asked, stepping closer but not too close. He'd learned to read the space around vulnerability. "I just need to check my balance." "But these buttons." She held up her hand, and he could see the arthritis in her knuckles, the way her fingers didn't quite obey anymore. "The numbers are pretty small," he agreed. "Would you like me to press them for you? You can tell me which ones." She hesitated. In that pause, Marcus saw decades of independence dissolving, the terrible mathematics of aging, how dignity gets subtracted one small surrender at a time. "That would be very kind." She dictated her PIN slowly, each number deliberate, trusting. When the balance appeared on screen, she stared at it for a long moment. Marcus pretended not to see the number, though it burned itself into his peripheral vision anyway. 247.18. "Thank you." She tucked the receipt into her wallet with careful precision. "You're very patient." "My name's Marcus," he said, though he wasn't sure why. "Eleanor." She looked down at Lily, who had been watching the interaction with the serious attention children bring to grown-up mysteries. "And who is this beautiful girl?" "I'm Lily, and I'm 6. And my daddy makes the best pancakes, but sometimes they're a little burnt on the bottom, but that's okay because the syrup covers it up." Eleanor's laugh was like wind chimes. "Well, Lily, who is 6, it's very nice to meet you, and burnt pancakes are often the most interesting ones." She gathered her things slowly, methodically. Marcus waited, though he could feel time pressing against his shoulders. Dinner to make, homework to supervise, the evening routine that kept their small world spinning. "You have a good daughter," Eleanor said, and there was something in the way she said it that made Marcus look at her more carefully. "Hold on to these years. They go by faster than you think." She walked toward the parking lot with measured steps, each one deliberate. Marcus watched her climb into an old Honda Civic, noting how she had to use both hands to pull the door shut. "She seemed lonely," Lily said as they walked to their own car. Marcus paused with his hand on the door handle, out of the mouths of babes. "What makes you say that?" The way she smiled, like she hadn't done it in a while. 3 months later, Marcus was debugging code at his kitchen table when his phone rang. The number was local but unfamiliar. "Hello, is this Marcus Rivera?" The voice took him a moment to place, then, careful, oddly formal. "This is Eleanor. From the grocery store, the ATM?" Marcus set down his coffee. "Eleanor, yes. How are you?" "I'm well, thank you. I hope I'm not disturbing you. I got your number from, well, that's not important right now. I was wondering if you might have time for coffee. There's something I'd like to discuss with you." The pause stretched between them. Marcus tried to remember if he'd given her his last name, how she might have found his number. "Is everything okay?" "Oh yes, everything's fine. It's just, well, I've been thinking about our conversation, about Lily, and I have a proposition that might interest you." Marcus looked around his apartment, the laptop surrounded by coffee-stained papers, the stack of unpaid bills tucked behind the fruit bowl. Lily's art supplies scattered across the counter where she'd been working on a project about families. "What kind of proposition?" "The kind better discussed in person. Tomorrow afternoon, perhaps? There's a cafe downtown, Rosemary's. Do you know it?" He did. It was the sort of place with cloth napkins and menu items that cost more than he usually spent on groceries in a day. "I can meet you there," he said, though uncertainty weighted his words. "Wonderful. 2 o'clock? And Marcus, please bring Lily if you can. What I want to talk about concerns her, too." After she hung up, Marcus stared at his phone. In his experience, mysterious propositions from near strangers rarely led anywhere good. But there had been something in Eleanor's voice, not desperation, exactly, but a careful hope that reminded him of someone trying not to spook a wild animal. He called Mrs. Chen, his upstairs neighbor who sometimes watched Lily when his freelance gigs ran late. "Can you cover for me tomorrow afternoon? Just for a couple hours." "Of course, dear." "Everything all right?" Marcus looked at the bills behind the fruit bowl, at the laptop screen where his latest project waited a website for a local restaurant that would pay just enough to cover rent. "I'm not sure yet." The next afternoon, Rosemary's Cafe hummed with the soft conversations of people who had nowhere urgent to be. Eleanor sat at a corner table, and Marcus almost didn't recognize her. She wore a navy dress that looked expensive, her hair was properly arranged, and she carried herself with a quiet authority that hadn't been visible at the ATM. "Marcus." She stood to greet him, and her handshake was firm despite the arthritis. And Lily. Lily had worn her favorite dress, the blue one, with tiny flowers that she'd insisted was fancy enough for a fancy place. She shook Eleanor's hand with the exaggerated seriousness of a child mimicking adult behavior. "I took the liberty of ordering some hot chocolate for Lily," Eleanor said as they settled at the table. "And they have excellent scones here." The hot chocolate arrived in a real mug, with whipped cream and a dusting of cinnamon. Lily's eyes widened. "This is like a movie," she whispered to Marcus. Eleanor smiled. "I used to bring my granddaughter here, years ago. She loved the whipped cream, too." Something in her voice made Marcus pay attention. "Used to. She lives far away now," Eleanor continued, reading his expression. "Seattle. Has her own family, her own life. We talk on holidays." The waiter brought coffee for the adults and set a plate of scones in the center of the table. Eleanor's hands were steadier today, Marcus noted. Purpose seemed to have restored some of their strength. "I need to tell you something," she said after Lily had become absorbed in the delicate operation of eating whipped cream with a spoon. "About who I am." Marcus set down his coffee. "My full name is Eleanor Whitman. You might not recognize the name, but my late husband was Robert Whitman. He founded Whitman Development." The name hit Marcus like cold water. Whitman Development owned half the commercial real estate downtown, had been responsible for most of the city's growth over the past 30 years. Robert Whitman had been local royalty, kind of man who got streets named after him. "I'm a widow," Eleanor continued, her voice carefully neutral. "Have been for 2 years now. And I've been thinking about what to do with, well, with everything." Lily looked up from her hot chocolate. "Are you rich?" "Lily?" Marcus started, but Eleanor held up a hand. "It's a fair question." She turned to Lily with the same seriousness the child had shown her. "Yes, I suppose I am. Does that change anything?" Lily considered this. "I don't think so. You're still nice." Eleanor's smile was radiant. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means more to me than you know." She turned back to Marcus. "The truth is, I've been quite lonely since Robert died. My daughter lives in Europe, London, actually." She has her own children, her own concerns. We're not. We don't talk often. Marcus tried to process this information, to understand why she was telling him. That day at the ATM, you were kind to me. Not just helpful kind. And your daughter. Eleanor looked at Lily, who had started building a small mountain out of sugar packets. She has something special. A way of seeing people. She does. Marcus agreed, still uncertain where this was leading. I've been thinking about legacy, Eleanor said, about what happens to things when we're gone. Robert built his company to last, to mean something. But companies aren't really legacy, are they? Not the kind that matters. She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. I'd like to propose something unusual. I'd like to help with Lily's education. Her college fund, whatever she needs. Not as charity, I know you're proud, and you should be. But as an investment. In her future and in the kind of person she might become. Marcus stared at the envelope. I don't understand. I don't have grandchildren nearby. I don't have young people in my life. And you. She paused, choosing her words carefully. You're raising someone remarkable. Someone who stops to help strangers, who notices when people are lonely. That's not accident, Marcus. That's how she's being raised. Lily looked up, sensing the weight of the adult conversation. What are you talking about? Miss Eleanor wants to help pay for your school, Marcus said slowly, for college when you're older. That's nice, Lily said, then returned to her sugar packet architecture. At 6, college was as abstract as outer space. Marcus looked at Eleanor, trying to read her face, to understand what she really wanted. There has to be more to this. Eleanor nodded. There is. I'd like to be part of her life, if you'll let me. Not as a grandmother, I wouldn't presume, but as a friend. Someone who cares about how she grows up. The cafe noise seemed to recede. Marcus thought about the bills behind the fruit bowl, about the college fund he'd started with such optimism and fed so irregularly, about the conversations he'd had with himself about what he could provide for Lily on a freelancer's income. Why us? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Do you believe in Providence, Marcus? I'm not sure. I didn't either, until recently. But that day at the ATM I'd been having a terrible week. Dealing with lawyers, with Robert's estate, with family members who suddenly had a lot to say about how I should spend my time. I felt invisible, irrelevant. And then you saw me, really saw me. She opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. This is a trust document. It sets aside money for Lily's education for any college she wants to attend, graduate school if she chooses. The only condition is that she maintains reasonable grades and stays out of serious trouble. Marcus looked at the paper without taking it. The numbers swam in front of his eyes. I can't accept this. You can, and more than that, you should. Not for yourself, but for her. Lily had moved on from sugar packets to arranging the small spoons in geometric patterns. She hummed quietly to herself, lost in the simple pleasure of ordering things. What do you want in return? Dinner once a month, Eleanor said. Updates on how she's doing in school? Maybe some holidays, if you're comfortable with that? The chance to watch someone I care about grow up. Marcus felt something shifting inside his chest, a door opening that he'd kept carefully locked. The mathematics of single parenthood were always brutal: too little time, too little money, too little margin for error. But this wasn't about the money, not really. She would like that, he said quietly. Having someone else who cares about her. Eleanor's eyes grew bright. Then you'll consider it? Marcus looked at his daughter, absorbed in her small creative project, unconscious of the adult negotiations happening around her. He thought about the freedom this would give him, not just financial, but emotional. The ability to dream bigger for her future. Yes, he said. Yes, we'll try this. Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Thank you, she whispered. Outside, the afternoon light was beginning to slant through the cafe windows, casting everything in gold. Lily finished her architectural project and looked proudly at her arrangement of spoons and sugar packets. Look, Daddy, it's a castle. Eleanor leaned forward to examine the construction with appropriate seriousness. It's beautiful. What's it called? The happy castle, Lily said without hesitation, because everyone who lives there is happy. Eleanor's laugh was different now, fuller, less careful. The happy castle. I like that very much. As they prepared to leave, Eleanor bent down to Lily's level. Would you like to have dinner with me sometime? At my house? I have a garden you might enjoy seeing. Lily looked at Marcus for permission, then back at Eleanor. Do you have flowers? Lots of them. And a greenhouse where I grow orchids. What are orchids? Very special flowers. Very fancy ones. I could show you how to take care of them, if you'd like. Lily nodded solemnly. I would like that very much. Outside the cafe, they stood in the parking lot for a moment, the weight of what had just happened settling around them like dust after construction. Eleanor handed Marcus a card with her phone number. Call me, she said, when you're ready. As she walked to her Honda Civic, Marcus noticed she moved differently now, with more purpose, less of that careful fragility he'd seen at the ATM. Daddy, Lily said as they got into their own car, is Miss Eleanor going to be like family now? Marcus started the engine, considering the question. I think she might be something like that. Good, Lily said, settling into her car seat. She needs us. Marcus caught her eyes in the rearview mirror. What makes you say that? She was lonely before, but she's not anymore. Driving home through the familiar streets of their neighborhood, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the sense that life might be about to become larger, more generous, filled with possibilities he hadn't dared to imagine. The trust document sat in the envelope on the passenger seat, but it wasn't the money that made his chest feel light. It was the idea that Lily would grow up knowing there were people in the world who cared about her future, who saw her the way he saw Hera's, someone worth investing in. At the next red light, he called Eleanor. I forgot to ask, he said when she answered. When would you like to have us for dinner? How about Sunday? She replied, and he could hear the smile in her voice. I'll make my famous pot roast. Fair warning, it's the only thing I cook really well. Sounds perfect. Marcus? Thank you for taking a chance on this. Thank you for seeing her, for seeing us. After he hung up, Marcus looked at Lily in the rearview mirror. She had fallen asleep, her head tilted against the window, still wearing her fancy dress. Tomorrow she would be back to her regular 6-year-old self-playground clothes and scraped knees and endless questions about everything. But something had shifted. The careful boundaries of their small world had expanded to include someone who remembered what it was like to be young, who had resources to share, but more importantly, had room in her heart for one more person to love. The light turned green, and Marcus drove toward home, toward whatever came next. Eleanor's house sat behind a wrought iron gate on Maple Hill, the kind of neighborhood where the sidewalks were smooth and the streetlights worked. Marcus had driven past it countless times over the years, admiring the old Victorian homes with their careful gardens and wondering what kind of people lived behind those windows. Now he knew. Sunday afternoon arrived crisp and clear, one of those October days when the light seemed to polish everything it touched. Lily had changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on her denim jumper with the embroidered flowers. Fancy, but not too fancy. She'd explained with the seriousness of a diplomat choosing the right outfit for a treaty signing. The gate was already open when they arrived. Eleanor appeared on the front porch, before Marcus had even turned off the engine, wearing jeans and a cream sweater that made her look younger, less formal than she had at the cafe. Welcome, she called out, and Marcus could hear genuine pleasure in her voice. The house was exactly what he'd expected and nothing like he'd imagined. Yes, there were expensive things art on the walls, Persian rugs, furniture that looked like it had been chosen by someone with both taste and money. But there were also coffee rings on the wooden tables, a stack of mystery novels next to a reading chair, reading glasses left on top of an open newspaper. It looked like a place where someone actually lived. The orchids, Lily announced the moment they walked through the door. You promised orchids, Eleanor laughed. Straight to business, I like that. But first, let me show you where everything is, in case you need anything. She led them through the house with the unhurried pace of someone who had nowhere else to be. The kitchen smelled like herbs and slow-cooked meat. The living room had tall windows that faced west, filling the space with golden light. And everywhere, there were photographs. Marcus found himself studying them as they walked Eleanor and a tall man with silver hair at various stages of their lives together. A young woman who must be her daughter, pictured at different ages, though none of the photos looked recent. And mixed in among the family pictures, other faces, children at what looked like school events, young adults in graduation caps. People Marcus didn't recognize, but who seemed to matter enough to earn places on Eleanor's mantle. "Those are my scholarship students," Eleanor said, noticing his attention. "Over the years, Robert and I supported quite a few young people through college. You did this before." "We did. Though never quite like this." She looked at Lily, who had discovered a music box on the coffee table and was examining its delicate ballerina with intense concentration. Usually it was more formal. Applications, essays, committee decisions. This is different. The greenhouse was attached to the back of the house, accessible through French doors that opened off the kitchen. The moment they stepped inside, the air changed warmer, more humid, filled with the green smell of growing things. Lily stopped just inside the doorway, her mouth forming a perfect O. The orchids were everywhere, dozens of them in different stages of bloom, some with flowers as small as buttons, others with blooms the size of dinner plates. Purple ones that looked like they belonged in a fairy tale, white ones so pure they seemed to glow, spotted ones that reminded Marcus of exotic birds. "Oh," Lily breathed. "They're like jewels." Eleanor's face lit up. "That's exactly what I thought when I first saw them. Would you like to help me water them?" For the next hour, Marcus watched his daughter learn the careful art of orchid care. Eleanor showed her how to test the moss, to see if it was dry, how to water without drowning the roots, how to mist the leaves without getting water on the flowers. "They're very particular," Eleanor explained as Lily held the small watering can with both hands. "They like just the right amount of everything: water, light, attention. Too much of any of it, and they get upset." "Like people," Lily said, concentrating on not spilling. Eleanor paused in her own watering. "Yes, exactly like people." Marcus found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in months. There was something about the greenhouse, the controlled environment, the sense of purpose, the way time seemed to slow down among the orchids that made his usual anxiety recede. "How long have you been growing them?" he asked. 20 years, maybe more. It started as something to do with my hands, after Robert got busy with the company. But it became—" she gestured at the collection around them. "Well, you can see what it became. They're beautiful. They're honest," Eleanor said, adjusting the position of a particularly spectacular purple bloom. "They can't pretend to be thriving if they're not. They show you exactly how they're doing, all the time." There was something in the way she said it that made Marcus look at her more carefully. "Is that why you like them?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment, watching Lily carefully water a small white orchid. "I spent a lot of years learning to hide how I was doing. To be what Robert needed, what the company wives were supposed to be, what my daughter expected. The orchids don't let you do that." She moved to a shelf of smaller plants, her movements deliberate and practiced. "After Robert died, I thought about letting them go. It seemed like too much work for one person. But then I realized they were the only things in my life that were completely honest with me." Marcus understood. Since Sarah had left, not died, but left, which somehow felt more complicated, he'd built his entire life around maintaining the illusion that everything was fine. For Lily's sake, mostly, but also for his own. The idea that there might be spaces where pretending wasn't necessary felt both terrifying and necessary. "Daddy, look." Lily had discovered an orchid with flowers that seemed to change color as they moved. "It's magic. Light refraction," Eleanor said, but she said it gently, without diminishing the wonder. "The petals have tiny structures that break up the light. But magic is a good word for it, too." They stayed in the greenhouse until the sun began to set, the light filtering through the glass walls, turning everything amber and gold. Lily had appointed herself the official orchid inspector, moving from plant to plant with serious attention, reporting on the health and beauty of each one. Dinner was pot roast with potatoes and carrots, served on china that looked like it belonged in a museum, but which Eleanor handled with casual familiarity. The dining room was smaller than Marcus had expected, more intimate, with candles on the table and classical music playing softly from speakers he couldn't see. "Tell me about school," Eleanor said to Lily as they ate. "What's your favorite subject?" "Art," Lily said immediately. "And reading, and science when we get to do experiments. But not math. Math is hard." "Math is hard," Eleanor agreed seriously. "What kind of art do you like to make?" "Pictures of things. And stories about the pictures. Last week I drew a dog that could fly, and then I wrote about where he went when he flew places." "Where did he go?" Lily considered this while chewing a piece of carrot. "To visit other dogs who were sad, to make them happy, and to deliver important messages that only flying dogs could deliver." Eleanor's eyes found Marcus's across the table. There was something in her expression, recognition maybe, or confirmation of something she'd already suspected. "That sounds like a very important job for a flying dog," she said. "I think so too. Daddy says I have a good imagination." "Your daddy is right. Imagination is one of the most important things a person can have." After dinner, they moved to the living room. Eleanor had lit a fire in the fireplace, and the room felt warm and safe, separate from the cooling October evening outside. Lily curled up on the rug with a book Eleanor had pulled from a shelf, something about a girl who could talk to flowers. "She's remarkable," Eleanor said quietly, settling into the chair across from Marcus. "The way she sees things, the way she thinks about other people's feelings. That's not common, even in children." Marcus watched his daughter, absorbed in her book, occasionally making small sounds of delight or surprise at whatever she was reading. "She gets that from her mother," he said, then immediately regretted it. He rarely talked about Sarah, especially not with people who didn't know the whole story. Eleanor waited, the way good listeners do. "Sarah left when Lily was 4, Marcus found himself saying. "Not for another man. Nothing dramatic like that. She just couldn't do it anymore. Being a mother, being married, being responsible for someone else's happiness. She said it felt like drowning. That must have been very hard. The hardest part was understanding it, because I could see what she meant. The weight of it, the way every decision affects someone else, the way you can't ever really relax because there's always someone depending on you." He paused. "But I couldn't imagine choosing anything else." Eleanor nodded. "Some people are built for that weight, others aren't. Neither is wrong, exactly, but it makes things complicated. She sends cards on birthdays, Christmas. She's living in Portland now, working for some nonprofit. She seems happy, from what I can tell." "And you?" Marcus looked at Lily, who had moved from the rug to the couch and was now reading with her feet tucked under her, completely absorbed. "I'm good," he said, and realized he meant it. "We're good. It took a while to figure out our rhythm, but we did. It shows. The way she trusts the world, the way she assumes people are basically good, that comes from feeling safe, from being loved consistently." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire, listening to Lily's occasional soft commentary on her book. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows gently. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said eventually. "Of course. Why didn't you and Robert have more children?" Eleanor's smile was sad around the edges. "We tried. For years we tried. Margaret to her daughter was a miracle, honestly. After that." She shrugged. "It just wasn't meant to be. I'm sorry. Don't be. We had a good life together, Robert and I. Different than we'd planned, but good. And Margaret gave us 2 wonderful grandchildren, even if they're far away." She paused. "But I always wondered what it would have been like to have more children around, to watch them grow up, to be part of their daily lives." Marcus began to understand the shape of what Eleanor was offering them. Not just financial support, but something deeper, a kind of chosen family, built around care rather than blood. "Is that what this is about?" he asked gently. "Partly, but not entirely." Eleanor leaned forward slightly. "I've been thinking a lot about legacy lately, about what lasts after we're gone. Robert built buildings, companies, things you can point to. But the students we helped over the years, the young people who went to college, because we could make it possible they're out there somewhere, living lives we made a little bit easier. Having families, building careers, maybe helping other people because someone once helped them. She gestured toward the photographs on the mantel. Those pictures represent dozens of lives that are different because Robert and I had resources and chose to share them. That feels more permanent to me than any building. Lily looked up from her book. Miss Eleanor, do you have any children's books about orchids? I don't, but that's an excellent idea. Maybe we could find some, or maybe someone we know could write one. Lily looked at Marcus with sudden excitement. Daddy could write one. He writes things on his computer. I write websites, Marcus said, embarrassed. Not books. But you could, Eleanor said, and there was something in her voice that made him look at her more carefully. Have you ever thought about it? Writing something besides websites? The honest answer was yes, he had thought about it. Before Lily, before the divorce, before life became about survival rather than dreams, he'd written stories. Nothing published, nothing important, but stories that felt real to him. Sometimes, he admitted, what kind of stories? Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. Kids' stories, mostly, about animals who go on adventures, solve problems, nothing sophisticated. Those are the best kind, Eleanor said. The kind that teach children that problems can be solved, that adventures are possible. Lily had abandoned her book entirely now, sensing opportunity. You should write about the flying dog, and maybe about orchids that grant wishes. Orchids that grant wishes, Eleanor repeated thoughtfully. I like that very much. The conversation drifted after that, moving naturally from topic to topic, Lily's upcoming school play, Eleanor's plans for her garden next spring, Marcus's latest freelance project. But underneath it all, Marcus could feel something building, a sense of possibility that was both exciting and terrifying. By the time they left, Lily was carrying a small orchid in a ceramic pot, a practice orchid, Eleanor had called it, to see if you have the touch, and Marcus had Eleanor's promise to look into children's book publishers who might be interested in stories about flying dogs and magical flowers. This was perfect, Eleanor said as they stood on her front porch, the October air crisp around them. Thank you for sharing your evening with me. Thank you for sharing yours with us, Marcus replied, and meant it. Lily hugged Eleanor with the unconscious affection of a child who had decided someone was safe. Can we come back next week? If your father doesn't mind, I'd love that. Driving home, Marcus felt the same sense of expansion he'd experienced after their coffee meeting, but deeper now, more rooted. The evening had felt natural in a way that surprised him, not like an obligation or a formal arrangement, but like time spent with family. I like Miss Eleanor, Lily announced from the back seat, cradling her orchid carefully. She listens to the important parts. What are the important parts? The parts about feelings and dreams and why things matter. Marcus caught her eyes in the rearview mirror. You're pretty wise for someone who's 6. I know, Lily said matter-of-factly. Miss Eleanor is wise too. That's why we're friends now. At home, they spent 20 minutes finding the perfect spot for the orchid somewhere, with enough light but not too much, where Lily could check on it easily, but where it would be safe from accidental bumps. Finally, they settled on the kitchen windowsill, where the morning sun would touch it gently. Do you think it will be happy here? Lily asked, adjusting the pot one more time. I think it will be, Marcus said, and realized he was talking about more than just the orchid. That night, after Lily was asleep, Marcus sat at his laptop and opened a new document. For the first time in years, he didn't type a web address or start coding. Instead, he wrote, Once upon a time, there was a dog who dreamed of flying. The words came easier than he'd expected, flowing like they'd been waiting for permission. He wrote about the dog's first attempts at flight, about the other animals who laughed until they saw him soar, about the lonely creatures he found on his aerial adventures and the simple kindness that could transform an ordinary day into something magical. He wrote until his eyes grew heavy, until the story found its natural ending. Then he saved the file and closed the laptop, feeling something he hadn't experienced in a long time, the satisfaction of creating something purely for the joy of creation. Outside his window, the neighborhood was quiet and dark, but inside the orchid sat in its spot on the sill, and somewhere in her bedroom, Lily dreamed whatever dreams 6-year-olds dream, and Marcus felt like they were all exactly where they were supposed to be. The call came on a Tuesday morning in November, while Marcus was helping Lily practice her lines for the school Thanksgiving play. She was a turkey, not the lead role, but she'd thrown herself into the part with characteristic enthusiasm, insisting on practicing her gobble-gobble until she had it just right. "Rivera Residence." "Marcus speaking," he answered, holding up a finger to pause Lily's performance. "Marcus, it's Eleanor. I hope I'm not calling too early." "Not at all. We're just rehearsing for Lily's play." He watched his daughter demonstrate her turkey walk across the living room, arms flapping with theatrical precision. "Oh, wonderful. I'd love to hear about it. But first I have some news that I think will interest you." Something in Eleanor's voice made Marcus pay closer attention. "Good news, I hope?" "I think so. You remember I mentioned looking into publishers for your children's stories?" Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He'd finished 3 stories in the past month: The Flying Dog, a tale about a garden where vegetables had personalities, and one about a little girl who could understand what flowers were thinking. He'd shown them to Lily, who declared them better than the ones in the library. But he hadn't seriously imagined anyone else would care about them. "You said you'd ask around." "I did more than ask around. I have a friend had a friend. She passed last year, but her daughter runs a small publishing house that specializes in children's books. Quality over quantity, if you know what I mean. I sent her your stories." Marcus sat down heavily on the couch. "Eleanor, you what? I hope you don't mind." "I just thought, well, they're wonderful, Marcus, really wonderful. And I thought someone should see them who might be able to do something with them." Lily had stopped her turkey performance and was watching Marcus with the intensity children bring to detecting adult stress. "What did she say?" "She wants to meet with you this Friday if you're available. Her name is Catherine Morrison, and she's published some lovely books over the years. Nothing that would make you rich, but books that matter to the children who read them." Marcus tried to process this information. "She wants to meet with me about the stories?" "She wants to discuss a contract, Marcus. She wants to publish them." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Marcus had been a freelancer long enough to know that most opportunities that sounded too good to be true were exactly that. But Eleanor's voice carried a certainty that was hard to dismiss. "I don't know anything about publishing," he said. "Neither did I 20 years ago. But Catherine is honest, and she's good at what she does. She'll walk you through everything." Lily had abandoned her turkey persona entirely now and was standing directly in front of Marcus, her expression serious. "Daddy, what's wrong?" Marcus covered the phone. "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. Miss Eleanor has some exciting news about the stories I wrote." "The Flying Dog story?" "All of them." Lily's face lit up. "Are they going to be real books, with covers and everything?" Marcus returned to the phone. "Eleanor, can I call you back?" "I need to." "Of course. But Marcus, this is real. She read your stories, and she wants to publish them. That doesn't happen often." After Eleanor hung up, Marcus sat staring at his phone, while Lily bounced around the living room, her excitement too big for her small body to contain. "Real books. Daddy, with your name on them. Can I tell everyone at school?" "Let's wait until we know for sure," Marcus said, though part of him wanted to call everyone he knew immediately. Friday afternoon found Marcus sitting in Catherine Morrison's office, a converted Victorian house downtown that had been turned into a maze of small publishing offices. Catherine herself was younger than he'd expected, maybe 40, with graying hair pulled back in a casual ponytail and reading glasses that hung from a chain around her neck. "Eleanor wasn't exaggerating," she said, gesturing to the printed copies of his stories spread across her desk. "These are really good. Not just good for a first-time author, but good period." Marcus felt like he was having an out-of-body experience. "Thank you. The Flying Dog story in particular, there's something special there. The way you handle the theme of helping others, the message about using your gifts to make a difference. It's not preachy, but it's clear. Children will get it without feeling like they're being lectured. She picked up the story about the girl who could understand flowers. And this one, the connection between listening and understanding, the idea that everything has something important to say if you know how to hear it. That's sophisticated emotional content for a picture book. I was thinking about my daughter when I wrote that one, Marcus admitted. She has this way of really seeing people, of understanding what they need. Catherine smiled. It shows. The best children's books come from that place, from real observation of how children think and feel. She leaned back in her chair. Here's what I'd like to propose. We publish all three as a series, The Lily Stories, maybe, or something similar. We do beautiful illustrations, high-quality printing, market them to independent bookstores and libraries. How does this work exactly? We offer you a contract with a modest advance enough to cover your time, but not enough to quit your day job yet. If the books do well, there are royalties, and we talk about more books. If they don't, well, you still have 3 published books with your name on them. Marcus tried to imagine walking into a bookstore and seeing his stories on the shelf, his name on the cover. What do you need from me? Your signature on a contract eventually. But first, I'd like you to meet our illustrator. Her name is Sarah Chenot, your Sarah, obviously, and she does beautiful work. If you're both comfortable with the collaboration, we move forward. The meeting lasted another hour, covering details that felt both mundane and surreal: publication timelines, marketing plans, the difference between hardcover and paperback editions. By the time Marcus left, his head was spinning with information and possibility. He called Eleanor from his car. "How did it go?" she asked immediately. "She wants to publish them, all 3, as a series." Eleanor's delighted laughter filled the car. "Oh, Marcus, that's wonderful. How do you feel?" "Terrified," he said honestly, "and excited, and grateful. If you hadn't, I didn't do anything except make a phone call." The stories speak for themselves. That evening, Marcus and Lily celebrated with pizza and ice cream while he tried to explain what was happening. Lily understood the important parts: that his stories would become real books, that other children would read them, that her daddy was going to be a real author. "Will you be famous?" she asked. Chocolate ice cream smeared around her mouth. "Probably not famous, but maybe famous to some people. That's good enough," she decided. Famous people can't go to the grocery store without being bothered. Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself living a double life. Days were still filled with freelance projects and school pickups and the ordinary routine of single parenthood. But evenings increasingly belonged to the strange new world of publishing: emails with Catherine about cover designs, phone calls with Sarah Chen about how to visualize a flying dog, conversations with Eleanor about the peculiar joy of seeing his imagination become something tangible. The orchid Lily had received from Eleanor had not only survived but thrived, producing a single perfect white bloom that seemed to glow in the kitchen window. Lily checked on it every morning, reporting its status like a meteorologist delivering a weather forecast. "The orchid is very happy today, Daddy. I think it likes our kitchen." "What makes you think it's happy?" "The way it sits up straight, and the flower is getting bigger. Happy things grow." It was the kind of observation that stopped Marcus in his tracks. The way children could distill complex truths into simple statements that adults spent years trying to understand. "You're right," he said. Happy things do grow. Sunday dinners at Eleanor's had become a cherished routine. The 3 of them fell into an easy rhythm: Lily helping in the greenhouse, Marcus and Eleanor cooking together, conversations that ranged from the sublime to the ridiculous. Eleanor proved to have opinions about everything from the best way to season roast chicken to the political implications of children's literature. "Books shape how children see the world," she said one evening as they worked together in her kitchen, Lily absorbed in watering orchids in the next room. "They learn about fairness, about courage, about what's possible." That's a tremendous responsibility. Marcus was chopping vegetables for a salad, finding the repetitive motion soothing. "Do you think my stories do that?" shape how kids see things? I think they show children that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, that kindness matters, that paying attention to others is important. Eleanor paused in her stirring. Those aren't small messages, Marcus. Through the greenhouse door, they could hear Lily talking to the orchids, a one-sided conversation about her day at school, her upcoming play, her thoughts on various topics that seemed important to her. She talks to them like they're people, Marcus observed. In her world, they probably are. Children don't draw the same lines we do between what's alive and what isn't, what can hear them and what can't. Marcus set down his knife. Is that why you wanted to help us? Because she sees the world differently? Eleanor turned from the stove, considering the question seriously. Partly, but also because you encourage her to see it that way. A lot of parents would correct that kind of thinking, tell her that plants can't hear her, that she's being silly. It doesn't hurt anything. Exactly. And it might help everything. If she grows up believing that her words matter, that everything around her deserves attention and care, well, imagine what kind of adult that becomes. The Thanksgiving play was a modest production held in the school gymnasium, with folding chairs arranged in uneven rows and a sound system that occasionally emitted high-pitched feedback. But watching Lily take the stage in her turkey costume, delivering her single line with perfect comic timing, Marcus felt pride swell in his chest until he thought he might burst. Eleanor sat beside him, applauding as enthusiastically as if they were at Carnegie Hall. Afterward, she insisted on taking pictures Lily in her costume, Marcus beaming beside her, the three of them together. For the memory book? Eleanor explained, though she didn't specify whose memory book she meant. That night, as Marcus tucked Lily into bed, she was still buzzing with excitement from her performance. Did you see how everyone laughed when I did my turkey walk? I did. You were perfect. Miss Eleanor said I was a natural performer. What does that mean? Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her hair away from her face. It means you're comfortable being yourself in front of other people. That's not as easy as it sounds. Lily considered this. It feels easy with you and Miss Eleanor watching, because I know you think I'm good at things. The simple truth of it hit Marcus like a physical force. Of course, it was easier to be brave when you knew someone believed in you, when you had evidence that your efforts mattered to people who mattered to you. We do think you're good at things, he said. We think you're good at a lot of things. I know, Lily said with matter-of-fact confidence. That's why I can be brave. December brought the first real snow and news that Marcus's books had been scheduled for publication in the spring. Catherine sent him advance copies of the cover designs' watercolor illustrations that captured exactly the whimsical spirit he'd hoped for. The flying dog looked joyful and determined, soaring above a landscape filled with small details that children would discover on repeated readings. The garden vegetables had distinct personalities visible in their expressions, and the flower-listening girl had an expression of deep concentration that made her gift seem both magical and completely believable. They're beautiful, Eleanor said when Marcus showed her the designs during one of their Sunday dinners. Really beautiful! Lily studied each cover with the careful attention of an art critic. The dog looks like he's having the best day ever. I think he is, Marcus said. And the girl looks like me when I'm really listening to something important. Marcus looked at the illustration more carefully. The girl did have something of Lily's intense focus, the way she completely absorbed herself in whatever had captured her attention. Maybe she is like you, he said. That evening, after they'd returned home and Lily was asleep, Marcus found himself thinking about the strange turns his life had taken. 6 months ago, he'd been a struggling freelancer, focused on making ends meet, measuring success in terms of bills paid and groceries bought. Now he was an author still struggling, still focused on making ends meet, but with this other identity emerging, this sense of possibility he'd forgotten he could feel. The change wasn't just about the books, though. It was about Eleanor's presence in their lives, the way she'd created space for dreams neither he nor Lily had dared to voice. Not just financial space, though the education fund remained a safety net that let him breathe easier. Emotional space. Permission to imagine that life could be larger than survival. His phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "Thank you for another lovely evening. Lily gets more remarkable every week." "So do you," Marcus smiled, typing back. "Thank you for seeing us, for seeing all of us. That's what family does," came her immediate reply. Marcus stared at the message for a long time. Family. Not by blood or law or any traditional definition, but by choice and care and the slow accumulation of shared meals and trusted confidences. He thought about Sarah, about the weight she'd found unbearable, the responsibility that had felt like drowning. But weight shared was different than weight carried alone. And responsibility, he was learning, could feel less like burden when it came with witnesses to your efforts, people who celebrated your small victories and helped you weather your inevitable failures. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the familiar neighborhood in pristine white. Inside, the orchid sat in its place of honor on the kitchen windowsill, its single bloom still perfect after weeks of Lily's devoted attention. Marcus opened his laptop and began typing a new story about a girl who adopted a grandmother, or maybe about a grandmother who adopted a girl. About the kind of family that chose itself, that grew not from obligation but from recognition. About the way love could expand to include unlikely combinations of people, creating something stronger than the sum of its parts. The words came easily, like they'd been waiting for him to understand what he needed to say. Spring arrived early that year, and with it came the boxes from Catherine's publishing house at 24 copies of Marcus's first book, The Dog Who Dreamed of Flying. He opened the package in his kitchen while Lily was at school, lifting out the first copy with hands that trembled slightly. The cover was even more beautiful in person. The paper had a subtle texture, and the colors seemed to glow under the kitchen lights. He opened to the title page, and there it was, printed in elegant font by Marcus Rivera. For a moment he couldn't breathe. His phone rang, Eleanor, as if she possessed some supernatural sense of timing. "Did they arrive?" she asked without preamble. "They're here," Marcus managed. "They're real. How do you feel?" Marcus looked at the book in his hands, at his name on the cover, at the dedication page he'd agonized over for weeks. For Lily, who sees magic everywhere, and for Eleanor, who helped us both believe in it. "Like someone else's life got mixed up with mine," he said honestly. Eleanor's laugh was warm. "That's exactly how it should feel. If it felt normal, it wouldn't be worth doing." That afternoon, Marcus picked up Lily from school with the book hidden in a bag behind his seat. He'd planned to wait until they got home to make it a proper ceremony, but Lily's chatter about her day was so animated that he found himself pulling over at the small park 2 blocks from their apartment. "Why are we stopping, Daddy?" "Because I have something to show you." He pulled the book from the bag and handed it to her. Lily's eyes went wide, and for once she was completely speechless. She held the book like it might dissolve if she gripped it too tightly, running her finger over the cover illustration. "It's real," she whispered. "It's a real book. Turn to the first page." She opened the cover carefully, as if she understood the magnitude of the moment. When she saw the title page, saw her father's name printed there, she looked up at him with an expression of pure awe. "You're a real author now." "I guess I am." Lily threw her arms around his neck, the book pressed between them. "I'm so proud of you, Daddy." Marcus held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, the lingering smell of school markers and glue sticks, and the particular energy of 6-year-olds learning about the world. This moment, he knew, would be one he remembered forever. Not the first time he saw his name in print, but the first time he saw it through his daughter's eyes. "Can we call Miss Eleanor?" Lily asked, pulling back. "She needs to know." They called Eleanor from the park bench, the book spread open between them. Eleanor's delight was infectious, her voice bright with genuine pleasure. "I'm having a dinner party," she announced. "Friday night. Just us, but we're celebrating properly. Champagne for the adults, sparkling cider for our author's inspiration." "You don't need to make a fuss," Marcus protested. "Oh, but I do. When someone you love publishes their first book, you absolutely make a fuss. It's practically a law." Someone you love. The phrase settled around Marcus like a warm coat. Friday evening found Eleanor's dining room transformed. She'd used her best china, lit candles, even hung a small banner that read, "Congratulations, Author Marcus," in hand-painted letters. "Did you make that?" Marcus asked, gesturing at the banner. "I did. It took me 3 tries to get the spacing right, but I'm quite proud of it." Lily was wearing her fanciest dress, the blue one with tiny flowers that she'd worn to their first cafe meeting. She'd insisted on braiding ribbons into her hair because it's a special occasion, and Marcus had to admit she looked beautiful. The meal was elaborate by Eleanor's usual standard sherb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables from her garden, a chocolate cake that she confessed to buying from the bakery downtown. "I draw the line at making celebration cakes from scratch," she said as she lit the single candle on top. "Some things are worth paying professionals for." They toasted with crystal glass of champagne for the adults, sparkling cider for Lily, who took her first sip with ceremonial seriousness. "To Marcus," Eleanor said, raising her glass, "for showing us that magic is real and that ordinary people can create extraordinary things." "To all of us," Marcus replied, looking between Eleanor and Lily, "for becoming the family I didn't know I needed." Lily giggled and raised her glass high. "To flying dogs and happy orchids and the best grown-ups in the whole world." They clinked glasses, and Marcus felt something settle in his chest, a sense of completion he hadn't even realized he'd been missing. After dinner, they moved to the living room, where Eleanor had arranged copies of the book on the coffee table, alongside photo albums Marcus hadn't seen before. "I thought you might like to see these," she said, opening the first album. "All the scholarship students Robert and I helped over the years." The pages were filled with photographs, graduation pictures, wedding photos, images of young adults at various stages of their lives. Each photo was accompanied by a handwritten note, updates on careers and families and dreams achieved. "This is Dr. Jennifer Martinez," Eleanor said, pointing to a picture of a young woman in a white coat. "She was the first in her family to go to college, pediatric oncology now. And this is David Kimhay, started a nonprofit that provides computers to underserved schools." Page after page revealed lives transformed by the simple act of believing in someone's potential, of providing the resources that could turn dreams into reality. "Why are you showing us this?" Marcus asked, though he thought he understood. "Because you're part of this now. Not just because of the trust fund for Lily, but because of who you are, what you're creating. Your books will touch children's lives in ways you can't predict." "And Lily." Eleanor looked at his daughter, who was studying the photographs with intense interest. "Lily is going to change the world, in her own way." Lily looked up from the album. "How will I change the world?" Eleanor smiled. "By being exactly who you are. By seeing people the way you see them. By caring about things the way you care about them. The world needs more people like you." "Like me and Daddy and you?" Lily said matter-of-factly, "People who help other people." "Exactly like that." Later that evening, as Marcus tucked Lily into bed, she was still processing the magnitude of the day. "Daddy, do you think other kids will like your book?" "I hope so. But even if they don't, I'm proud that I wrote it." "They'll like it," Lily said with absolute confidence, "because it's about being kind and helping people, and everyone likes stories about that." Marcus kissed her forehead. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned it from you and Miss Eleanor. You teach me things without even knowing you're teaching them." After Lily was asleep, Marcus found himself standing in the kitchen, looking at the orchid on the windowsill. It had produced a second bloom smaller than the first, but perfect in its own way. 2 flowers on one plant, defying the odds through careful attention and consistent care. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hi, this is Catherine Morrison. Your book officially goes on sale Monday. Thought you should know. Congratulations, you're officially a published author." Marcus stared at the message, trying to make it feel real. On Monday, strangers would be able to walk into bookstores and buy something he had created. Children would read his words, see his flying dog, maybe dream a little bigger because of stories he had imagined. He thought about Eleanor's photo albums, about all those lives touched by simple generosity. He thought about Lily's confidence that his book would help other children learn about kindness. He thought about the chain of small acts that had led to this moment: helping a stranger at an ATM, accepting an invitation to coffee, choosing to trust in the possibility that life could be larger than survival. The next morning brought unexpected snow, a late spring storm that covered everything in pristine white and canceled school for the day. Marcus called in sick to his current freelance project and decided to spend the day with Lily, building snowmen and drinking hot chocolate and celebrating the strange turn their lives had taken. They were in the middle of constructing an elaborate snow fort when Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed Catherine Morrison's number. "Marcus, I have news," she said without preamble. "Good news." "What kind of news?" "The kind where I tell you that the advance orders for your book are higher than we expected, much higher. And there's interest from a major bookstore chain for a reading tour." Marcus sat down heavily on their half-built snow fort. "A reading tour?" "Nothing huge. Maybe 10 cities, primarily in the region. But it would mean bookstore appearances, meeting young readers, talking about your work. Are you interested?" Lily had stopped building and was watching Marcus with the intense attention children bring to detecting changes in their world. Yes, I think I am." "Excellent. I'll send you the details." "Oh, and Marcus? You might want to start thinking about your next book. I have a feeling we're going to want more from you sooner rather than later." After Catherine hung up, Marcus sat in the snow, trying to process this new development. A reading tour, meeting children who had read his stories, the possibility of more books, a real career, doing something he loved. "What's happening, Daddy?" Lily asked, settling beside him in the snow. "Good things," Marcus said. "Unexpected, wonderful, slightly terrifying good things. Are you scared?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "A little, but the good kind of scared, the kind that means something important is happening." Lily nodded sagely, "Like when I was scared to be the turkey in the play, but also excited." Exactly like that. They spent the rest of the morning finishing their snow fort, and Marcus found himself thinking about fear and excitement, about the way they could coexist in the same moment. He thought about Eleanor's courage in reaching out to strangers, about Lily's fearless kindness, about his own willingness to trust in possibilities he couldn't quite believe. That afternoon, they walked to Eleanor's house through the snow-covered streets. She met them at the door with hot soup and warm bread, as if she'd been expecting them. "I heard about the reading tour," she said, as they settled around her kitchen table. "Catherine called to make sure you had support for traveling with Lily." Marcus paused with his spoon halfway to his mouth. "She called you?" "She wanted to know if there was family who could help with childcare during your appearances. I told her that family comes in many forms and that we'd figure it out." Lily looked up from her soup. "Does that mean Miss Eleanor gets to come with us on the book tour?" Eleanor and Marcus exchanged glances. "If your father is comfortable with that," Eleanor said carefully. "I could certainly help with logistics, provide an extra pair of hands." Marcus felt that familiar sensation of life expanding beyond the boundaries he'd thought were fixed. The idea of traveling to new cities, of sharing his stories with children across the region, had seemed daunting when he was imagining doing it alone with Lily. But with Eleanor's support, it felt like an adventure rather than an ordeal. "I think," he said slowly, "that would be wonderful." Lily clapped her hands together. "It'll be like a family vacation, but with books." "The best kind of vacation," Eleanor agreed. That evening, as they prepared to leave Eleanor's house, she pulled Marcus aside. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice unusually serious. "About the trust fund, about all of this." Marcus felt a flutter of worry. "What about it?" "It's not just about Lily's education anymore. It's not even primarily about that." Eleanor paused, choosing her words carefully. "You've both given me something I thought I'd lost forever. A sense of purpose, of being needed, of watching someone I care about discover what they're capable of." She gestured toward the living room where Lily was saying goodbye to the orchids in the greenhouse. "I want to establish a foundation. Something that supports young writers, provides opportunities for single parents to pursue creative work, helps families like yours turn dreams into reality. I want to call it the Lily Foundation. Marcus stared at her. Eleanor, I can't let you. It's not about letting me do anything. It's about what I want to do with the resources I have, the legacy I want to leave. Her voice grew stronger. I spent 40 years being Robert Whitman's wife, supporting his dreams, helping build his empire. Now I want to build something of my own. Something that matters in the way helping you has mattered. Through the greenhouse door, they could hear Lily conducting a detailed conversation with a particularly spectacular purple orchid, updating it on the day's events and sharing her thoughts on the proper way to handle snow. She talks to them like their family, Eleanor observed. She talks to everyone like their family, Marcus replied. It's her gift. It's your gift, too. The way you write, the way you see children, the way you've raised her to see the world as a place full of potential friends rather than potential threats. Eleanor turned to face him fully. That's what I want to support. That's what the foundation will be about. Marcus felt tears threatening, a surge of gratitude so strong it was almost overwhelming. I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me figure out how to do it right. Say you'll let me be part of watching Lily grow up. Say you'll keep writing stories that remind children that kindness is powerful and that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Yes, Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. Yes, to all of it. Eleanor smiled, and in that smile, Marcus saw not just affection, but recognition, the look of someone who had found exactly what they'd been searching for without knowing they were searching. The drive home was quiet, Lily dozing in the back seat, exhausted by the day's adventures. Marcus found himself thinking about the strange mathematics of connection, the way helping one person at an ATM could somehow multiply into this books and foundations, and the kind of love that chooses itself. At a red light, he glanced in the rearview mirror at his sleeping daughter. Tomorrow she would wake up in a world where her father was a published author, where a foundation would bear her name, where the future stretched ahead full of possibilities they were only beginning to imagine. But tonight, she was simply a 6-year-old girl who had spent the day building snow forts and eating soup with people who loved her, dreaming whatever dreams came to children who had learned that the world was fundamentally safe, that adults could be trusted to keep their promises, that kindness was not just possible but expected. The light turned green, and Marcus drove toward home, toward whatever came next. The reading at Chapter's End bookstore in downtown Burlington was Marcus's first, and he stood behind the small podium feeling like an imposter in his borrowed confidence. 23 children sat cross-legged on the carpet before him, their faces upturned with the expectant attention that only happens in libraries and at bedtime. Lily sat in the front row beside Eleanor, wearing her most serious expression, the look she reserved for occasions she deemed important. She'd insisted on introducing him. "This is my daddy," she'd announced to the gathered children with the authority of someone who knew exactly what mattered. "He wrote a book about a dog who can fly, and it's really good, and he's going to read it to you now." The applause was enthusiastic if brief, and then Marcus opened his book and began. Once upon a time, there was a dog who dreamed of flying. The words felt different read aloud, more alive somehow. He watched the children's faces as the story unfolded, saw them lean forward when the dog first took flight, giggle when he crash-landed in a pile of autumn leaves, grow thoughtful when he decided to use his gift to help other animals who were lonely or lost. When he finished, a forest of small hands shot up. "Why did the dog want to fly?" asked a girl with braids and missing front teeth. Marcus looked at Lily, who nodded encouragingly. "What do you think?" "Because flying means you can see everything," the girl said solemnly. "And if you can see everything, you can help everyone." "That's exactly right," Marcus said, and meant it. More questions followed about how dogs learn to fly, about whether the story was real, about whether Marcus had ever wanted to fly himself. The children's logic was unassailable, their curiosity endless and generous. Afterward, as parents lined up to buy books and have them signed, Marcus found himself in conversations he hadn't anticipated. A mother whose son had started leaving food out for stray cats after hearing the story. A father who said his daughter had been talking all week about how to help the new kid at school who seemed lonely. "You've given them permission to believe in kindness?" one woman said as Marcus signed her copy. "That's not a small thing." Eleanor stood nearby, helping manage the line, beaming with what could only be described as grandmotherly pride. Lily had appointed herself official photographer, documenting everything with Eleanor's phone and providing running commentary on the proceedings. "Daddy's really good at this," she announced to anyone within earshot. "He makes the voices different for each character." The drive to their hotel that evening was quiet, all three of them pleasantly exhausted. They'd done 2 readings that day at the bookstore, another at the elementary school, and Marcus felt wrung out in the best possible way. "How do you feel?" Eleanor asked from the passenger seat. "Like I understand something I didn't before," Marcus said, still processing the day. "About why people write books for children." "What do you understand?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, trying to find the words. "Children believe that stories are instructions. Not just entertainment, but guidance about how the world works, what's possible, what matters. That's a tremendous responsibility." In the back seat, Lily had fallen asleep clutching the hotel's complimentary teddy bear, her face peaceful in the glow of passing streetlights. "She's proud of you," Eleanor said softly. "I'm proud of me too," Marcus admitted. "Is that terrible?" "It's wonderful. Pride in work well done, in courage well used, that's different than vanity. That's satisfaction." The hotel room had 2 double beds and a fold-out couch that Lily had immediately claimed as her adventure bed. While Eleanor helped her get ready for sleep, Marcus stepped onto the small balcony and called Catherine Morrison. "How did it go?" Catherine asked immediately. "Better than I hoped. The children were. They got it, you know? They understood what the story was really about." "Of course they did. Children are excellent literary critics. They're honest about what works and what doesn't." Marcus could hear traffic in the background, the sounds of Catherine's own evening routine. "I wanted to ask you about something." Eleanor mentioned the possibility of more books. "More than mentioned. We'd like to offer you a 3-book contract, Marcus. The advance would be substantial enough that you could focus on writing full-time, at least for a while." Marcus gripped the balcony railing. "Full-time?" "Full-time. No more freelance websites, no more worrying about paying rent. Just books, just stories. Are you interested?" Through the sliding door, Marcus could see Eleanor reading to Lily from a book they'd picked up at the day's second stop, something about a mouse who wanted to be an astronaut. Lily's eyes were heavy but determined, fighting sleep to hear the end of the story. "Yes," Marcus said. "Yes, I'm very interested." After Catherine hung up, Marcus stood on the balcony for a long time, looking out over a city he'd never visited before today, thinking about the strange turns life could take. This morning he'd been a struggling freelancer who happened to have written a book. Tonight he was apparently a full-time author with a reading tour and a contract for more books than he'd dared imagine writing. Inside, Eleanor had finished the bedtime story and was tucking Lily into her adventure bed. "Tell Daddy I said good night," Lily mumbled, already half asleep. "And tell him I'm proud he's brave enough to read to strangers." Eleanor smiled and came out to join Marcus on the balcony. "She says she's proud you're brave enough to read to strangers." "I heard." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Catherine offered me a 3-book contract, full-time writing." Eleanor's face lit up. "Oh, Marcus, that's wonderful." "It's terrifying," he said honestly. "What if the first book was a fluke? What if I can't do it again?" "What if you can?" Eleanor countered. "What if this is exactly what you were meant to be doing?" Marcus looked through the sliding door at Lily, now fully asleep, clutching both the hotel teddy bear and a small stuffed dog that looked remarkably like the one from his book-a-gift from one of the children at the school reading. "She's going to grow up thinking this is normal," he said, "her father being an author, traveling to readings, people knowing his name. Would that be so terrible?" "No," Marcus said slowly. "I think it would be wonderful. I think it would teach her that dreams are achievable, that creative work has value, that it's possible to make a living doing something you love. Eleanor nodded. Those are good lessons. Better than the ones I was teaching her before. About scraping by, about settling for less, about dreams being luxuries we couldn't afford. You were teaching her resilience, resourcefulness, the value of hard work. Those are good lessons too. Eleanor leaned against the balcony railing beside him. But now she gets to learn both. Security and possibility, safety and adventure. 3 months later, Marcus stood in Eleanor's greenhouse, holding an advance copy of his second book, The Garden Where Vegetables Tell Jokes. The illustrations were even more beautiful than the first book, and the dedication read, "For Eleanor, who tends hearts the way she tends orchids, and for all the children who believe that everything has something important to say." Lily was at school, but she'd already seen the book, had already pronounced it even better than the flying dog one, with the confident authority of someone who considered herself an expert on her father's work. "How many orchids do you have now?" Marcus asked, looking around the greenhouse that had grown noticeably more crowded since their first visit. 47, Eleanor said without hesitation. Each one different, each one with its own needs and personality. Like children. Exactly like children. Eleanor adjusted the position of a small yellow orchid that was just beginning to bloom. "Speaking of which, I have news about the foundation." Marcus looked up from the book. "Good news?" "The best. We're officially incorporated, we have our non-profit status, and we've received our first grant application." Eleanor pulled a folder from the potting bench and handed it to Marcus. Inside was a typed application from a single mother in the next county woman who wanted to go back to school to become a teacher, who had the grades and the determination but not the resources. "Her name is Maria Santos," Eleanor said. "She has 2 children, works 2 jobs, and she's been trying to save enough for college for 3 years. Her essay is, well, read it yourself." Marcus scanned the pages, reading about dreams deferred and hope maintained, about children who deserve to see their mothers succeed, about the belief that education could transform not just one life, but an entire family. "It could be my story," he said quietly. "If I'd been brave enough to apply for something like this. It could be anyone's story." That's the point. Eleanor moved to another orchid, one that was struggling despite her careful attention. "We can change her life, Marcus. We can make it possible for her to become a teacher, to show her children that dreams are achievable." Marcus thought about the reading tour, about the children who had listened to his stories with such attention, about the way they had absorbed the message that kindness mattered, that ordinary people could do extraordinary things. How many people could we help? This year, maybe 20 families. But if we do it right, if we choose well, those 20 families will touch hundreds of other lives. Teachers teach thousands of students over their careers. Writers influence readers they'll never meet. Artists create beauty that lasts generations. Eleanor paused in her work, looking directly at Marcus. The mathematics of generosity are exponential. One act of kindness multiplies in ways we can't predict or measure. That evening, Marcus picked up Lily from school and drove directly to Eleanor's house. The 3 of them had fallen into the habit of making important decisions together, of treating their chosen family as exactly that, a family. "We got our first grant application," Eleanor announced as soon as Lily had hung up her backpack. Lily's eyes widened. "For the foundation that has my name." "The very one. A mother who wants to become a teacher. Are we going to help her?" Eleanor looked at Marcus, who nodded. "Yes," Eleanor said. "We're going to help her." Lily clapped her hands together with satisfaction. "Good, teachers are important. They help children learn about everything." After dinner, while Lily was absorbed in a complicated art project involving construction paper and an alarming amount of glue, Eleanor and Marcus sat in the living room planning the foundation's future. "I've been thinking about criteria," Eleanor said, a legal pad covered with notes in her lap. "Not just financial need, but potential for impact. People who will use the opportunity to help others. Like teachers, like teachers, social workers, nurses, writers who want to create books for underserved communities, people whose success multiplies. Marcus looked at the photographs on Eleanor's mantel, those scholarship students, now doctors and engineers and teachers and parents themselves, creating ripples of positive change that spread far beyond what Eleanor and Robert could have imagined when they'd first decided to help. "What about children?" he asked. Eleanor looked up from her notes. "What about them? Not just college scholarships. What about programs for younger kids? Writing workshops, art classes, opportunities for children who show promise but don't have resources." Eleanor smiled. "You're thinking about the children at your readings." "I'm thinking about Lily, about how different her life would be if she didn't have us. If she was one of those kids who gets told that creative dreams are impractical, that art is a waste of time. What did you have in mind?" Marcus had been thinking about this for weeks, an idea that had been growing since his first school reading. Summer programs, workshops where children can explore writing, illustration, storytelling, not just for kids who are already confident, but for the ones who need permission to believe in their own creativity. Eleanor set down her legal pad. "That's a beautiful idea. We could partner with schools, libraries, community centers, bring in real authors and artists, give kids the chance to see that creative careers are possible. And not just careers," Eleanor added, understanding immediately. "Creative thinking, problem-solving, empathy, communication, all the skills that come from engaging with stories and art." From the kitchen came the sound of Lily's artistic endeavor: scissors, cutting paper, the scratch of crayons, the soft humming she did when she was completely absorbed in creating something. "She's going to remember this," Marcus said. "Growing up with someone who believed in her dreams, who had the resources to support them. That's going to shape how she thinks about possibility for the rest of her life." "It's going to shape how she thinks about responsibility too," Eleanor replied. "When you've been given much, you give much in return. That's not obligation, that's privilege." Later that evening, after they'd returned home, and Lily was in bed, Marcus found himself standing in their small kitchen, looking at the orchid on the windowsill. It now had 3 blooms, each one perfect, each one proof that careful attention could create beauty even in unlikely places. His phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "Thank you for today, for the foundation ideas, for including me in the decisions, for letting me be part of this family you're building. I've never been happier." Marcus typed back, "Thank you for seeing us, for believing in us, for showing us what family could look like. It looks like love," came her immediate reply. "It looks exactly like love." Marcus smiled, setting his phone aside. Outside, the neighborhood was settling into evening quiet, porch lights coming on, families finishing dinner, children being tucked into beds in houses he'd driven past 1,000 times without knowing the stories they contained. But inside his own small apartment, everything had changed. The kitchen where he'd once sat alone worrying about bills now hummed with purpose. The living room where he'd struggled through homework battles was now the place where he wrote stories that children across the region were reading. The bedroom where he'd lain awake wondering if he was enough for Lily was now the place where he slept peacefully, knowing that she was growing up surrounded by people who loved her, who saw her potential, who would help her become whoever she was meant to be. He opened his laptop and began typing a new story about a girl who planted kindness like seeds, about the garden that grew from her generous heart, about the way love could multiply until it covered the world in unexpected beauty. The words came easily, like they'd been waiting for him to understand that this was his work now, not just writing books, but planting hope, nurturing possibility, showing children that the world was full of people who cared about their dreams. 1 year later, Marcus stood at the edge of Eleanor's garden watching Lily teach a group of 8 children how to properly water seedlings. It was the first week of the Lily Foundation's inaugural summer program, and his daughter had appointed herself assistant instructor with the seriousness of someone who understood the weight of responsibility. "Not too much," she was saying to a boy named Jamie who was attacking his tomato plant with excessive enthusiasm. "Plants are like people. They need just the right amount of everything to be happy." Eleanor caught Marcus's eye from across the garden, her smile radiant. At 73, she moved with the energy of someone who had found her true calling. The foundation had grown beyond their wildest projections. They were now supporting 12 families, running 3 different programs, and had a waiting list that broke Marcus's heart in the best possible way. "She's a natural teacher," Eleanor said, joining him at the garden's edge. "She gets that from you. She gets that from being seen and heard and valued. Children who grow up knowing their thoughts matter become adults who help other people's thoughts matter too." Marcus watched Lily demonstrate the proper way to check soil moisture, her small hands gentle but confident. The other children hung on her every word, drawn to her combination of knowledge and kindness. "Do you remember what you said about the mathematics of generosity being exponential?" Marcus asked. Eleanor nodded. "I think I'm starting to understand what you meant." The program had attracted children from across the county, some whose parents had heard about it through the school system, others who had been specifically referred by teachers who recognized untapped potential. There was Maria Santos's daughter, whose mother was now in her 2nd year of the education program Eleanor had funded. There was a quiet boy whose grandmother had driven 2 hours each way every day for a week because she believed in his gift for storytelling. There was a girl who drew constantly but had never been told her art was good, who was now working with a professional illustrator on her first picture book. 20 children this summer," Eleanor said, reading his thoughts. "But look at them, really look. How many other lives will be touched by what they learn here?" Marcus could see the expanding circles of influence. Children who would grow up believing creativity was valuable, who would encourage their own children to dream big, who would support arts programs in their communities, who would write stories or paint pictures or simply move through the world with the confidence that came from being nurtured. "I finished the new book," he said quietly. Eleanor's face lit up. "The one about the foundation? About chosen families, about the way love multiplies when it's shared freely." He'd struggled with this story more than the others, trying to find the right way to tell the truth about what had happened to them without making it sound like a fairy tale. But children, he'd learned, could handle complex truths when they were presented with honesty and hope. "What's it called?" "The Woman Who Collected Hearts." Eleanor was quiet for a moment, watching the children work in the garden. Then she reached over and squeezed his hand. "Thank you," she said simply. That evening, after the children had been picked up by parents full of stories about seeds and soil and the magic of growing things, Marcus and Eleanor and Lily sat in the greenhouse sharing dinner among the orchids. It had become their tradition on program days, a quiet meal surrounded by beauty, a chance to decompress from the wonderful chaos of children learning. "I have an announcement," Lily said, setting down her fork with ceremony. Marcus and Eleanor exchanged amused glances. At 7, Lily had developed a flair for the dramatic. "What's your announcement, sweetheart?" Eleanor asked. "I've decided what I want to be when I grow up." "Oh, what's that?" Lily looked around the greenhouse, at the orchids that had been her companions for more than a year, at the adults who had shaped her understanding of what was possible. "I want to be like you and Daddy," she said seriously. "I want to help people grow into who they're supposed to be." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means I want to teach children about plants and stories and kindness. I want to have programs like ours, but everywhere. I want every kid to know that grown-ups believe in them and that their dreams are important." Eleanor's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "That sounds like the most important job in the world." "It is," Lily said with absolute confidence, "because if all the children know they matter, then when they grow up, they'll make sure all the other children know they matter too." Later that night, after Lily was asleep and Eleanor had gone home, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with his laptop, working on his 4th book. The story was flowing more easily than usual, perhaps because he finally understood what he was really writing about. It wasn't just about flying dogs or talking vegetables or magical gardens. It was about the fundamental human need to be seen, to be valued, to have someone believe in your potential even when you couldn't see it yourself. It was about the way kindness could transform lives, how generosity created abundance rather than scarcity, how love shared freely multiplied beyond all logic. His phone buzzed with a text from Catherine Morrison. Advanced orders for Book 4 are already higher than anything we've done before. The reading tour is going to be our biggest yet. Are you ready to be famous? Marcus smiled, typing back, I'm ready to share stories that matter. Same thing, came Catherine's immediate reply. Marcus looked around his apartment, still small, still modest, but now filled with purpose rather than struggle. The kitchen table where he'd once sat paralyzed by unpaid bills was now where he created worlds that helped children believe in possibility. The living room where he'd worried about providing enough for Lily was now where she did homework she loved, secure in the knowledge that her education was guaranteed, her dreams supported. But more than the financial security, more than the professional success, was the sense of rightness that pervaded everything now. The feeling that he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do, surrounded by exactly the people who belonged in his life. On the windowsill, the orchid Eleanor had given them more than a year ago was thriving beyond all expectations. It now had 5 blooms in various stages of opening, and Lily had been documenting their progress with the dedication of a scientist. She'd named each flower Hope, Joy, Love, Dream, and Wonderland, talked to them every morning as part of her routine. They're like us, she'd explained to Marcus recently. They started with just one flower, but when they knew they were loved and cared for, they made more flowers to share the happiness. It was, Marcus reflected, as good a metaphor as any for what had happened to their family. His laptop chimed with an email from Maria Santos, whose teacher certification program Eleanor had funded. She'd attached a photo from her first day teaching 3rd grade, surrounded by 25 children, who looked at her with the same attention and trust Marcus remembered from his first school reading. Thank you for believing in my dream, she'd written. Every day I stand in front of these children, I remember that someone saw potential in me when I couldn't see it myself. I promise to do the same for them. Marcus forwarded the email to Eleanor with a note. The mathematics of generosity in action. Her reply came within minutes. Beyond my wildest calculations, we're going to need a bigger foundation. Outside, the neighborhood was settling into summer evening quiet. Children were being called in for baths and bedtime stories. Families were finishing dinner on front porches. The ordinary magic of daily life was unfolding in houses full of their own dreams and struggles and small victories. Marcus closed his laptop and went to check on Lily, finding her fast asleep, with a book about botanical gardens open on her chest, and her arms wrapped around a stuffed orchid Eleanor had bought her during their last bookstore appearance. He adjusted her covers, turned off her reading light, and stood for a moment in the doorway watching her sleep. Tomorrow she would wake up in a world where she was deeply loved, where her thoughts and dreams mattered to multiple adults, where she would spend the day teaching other children about the miracle of growing things. She would grow up understanding that families could be built from choice and care rather than just blood, that resources shared created abundance rather than scarcity, that kindness was not just nice but necessary, the force that held communities together and made extraordinary things possible. In her sleep, she smiled slightly, dreaming whatever dreams came to children who had learned that the world was fundamentally safe, that adults could be trusted to keep their promises, that love was not finite but infinite, expanding to include whoever needed it most. Marcus turned off the light and walked back to the kitchen, where his laptop waited and another story was beginning to take shape in his mind. This one would be about a girl who grew up in a garden tended by people who understood that the most important crop was hope, and how that hope spread from person to person until it covered the world in unexpected abundance. Through the window, the neighborhood slept peacefully under a canopy of stars. But inside this small apartment, everything glowed, with the quiet radiance of lives transformed by the simple decision to see each other clearly, to respond to need with generosity, to believe that ordinary people could create extraordinary change through the accumulated weight of daily kindness. Marcus began to type, and the words came like gifts, each sentence a seed, Each paragraph a promise that love shared freely would bloom beyond all expectation, creating beauty in the most unlikely places and proving, again and again, that the mathematics of the heart defied every practical calculation, multiplying endlessly in the hands of those brave enough to believe in its power.